is Rebecca Rice, and today I'm going to be talking to you about education. What comes to mind when you think of the word education? Maybe it's school buildings, teachers, classrooms, students lined up in rows neatly taking notes. Or maybe that's not what comes to mind. Maybe it's standing in a crisp uniform, pledging allegiance to the flag every morning. Maybe not even that. Maybe you first think of logging on to Blackboard to complete the new module available in your online class. As we can see, there are many different kinds of education available in today's day and age. But today, I would like to hone in on one specific type of education, and that is homeschooling. But what is homeschooling? Well, homeschooling is defined as whenever education is done in a student's home or conducted in a student's home by their primary parent or guardian. This is important to distinguish from general online schooling because online schooling is generally done where there are educated and professional teachers teaching from a remote location with a public school approved curriculum. So homeschooling in grades K through 12 is very different from public schooling in grades K through 12. There are currently 2.3 million homeschoolers in the US, and this number has been climbing in recent years. And whenever something grows in popularity and climbs, questions generally arise. The main question that comes to mind when you think of homeschooling is generally, are kids even being educated? Is homeschooling schooling at all, or are children just sitting at home playing Minecraft all day? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, is defeating that stigma and understanding that homeschooling can be equal to public schooling. Homeschooling can provide an education equal in value to that of a public school. It can prepare its students for college just as well as a public school can, and it can provide adequate socialization when compared to public schooling. And I believe it does this through flexibility and the ability to have an individualized education plan. So let's take a look at the educational value and academic achievement of homeschoolers compared to their public school peers. It can sometimes be difficult to compare educational value and academic achievement between schooling methods because children aren't always doing the same type of work, they aren't always being graded on the same scales. But one way we can compare this is through standardized testing like the SAT and ACT. When we compare the scores of homeschooled students to public school students on these standardized tests, homeschooling students often do better. Homeschoolers tend to score within the 70th to 90th percentile, performing extremely better than their public school peers in areas like English and history, and doing just as well as their public school peers in areas like math and science. Another thing we can look at to compare the academic ability of homeschooled and public schooled students is critical thinking skills. One of the main goals of education is to provide students adequate critical thinking skills as they go into life. One study done in 1994 showed the scores on the California critical thinking test on numerous students across many different forms of education, and this showed no statistical difference in the critical thinking skills of homeschoolers when compared to their public schooling peers. Another area in which we can compare the educational value of homeschooling and public schooling is the college readiness of the students after graduation. Most studies have shown little to no difference or statistically important difference between homeschoolers and public schoolers in their first year of college, though in a few areas, homeschoolers did come out on top. For example, the average GPA of a previously homeschooled student in their first year of college is 3.41, where the average GPA of a previously public schooled student in their first year of college is 3.12. When we take a look at the emotional readiness for college, homeschoolers were found to have a higher openness to new experiences, to be more conscientious about their classes and studies, and reported less anxiety overall. Homeschoolers were also more likely to take on leadership positions on campus, and they also stayed in these leadership positions longer. As far as acceptance and graduation rates go, homeschoolers are accepted to colleges and universities at the same rates as public schoolers, showing that homeschooling in no way detriments a student's ability to move on to higher education. When we look at graduation rates, homeschoolers actually graduate at a rate of 10% higher than public school students. Homeschoolers graduating at a rate of about 67% and public schoolers graduating at a rate of about 57%. One of the main concerns, however, of parents looking at homeschooling as a viable option for their student is socialization. People are worried that homeschoolers will turn into recluse hermits that never come out of their homes, but studies have shown the exact opposite, with homeschoolers often turning out more socialized than their public school peers. This is done unconventionally, yes, but they are still socializing just as much. One of the reasons for this is because they are exposed to more natural and normative socialization than their public school peers. Children learn through observation, monkey see, monkey do. When they see their parents socializing out in the real world, they then internalize that and learn to socialize for themselves. This can often be seen when children are playing house or doctor or things like that. They are watching their parents socialize and internalizing that and learning how to socialize for themselves that way. Homeschoolers experience more of this normative socialization because they are out in the real world with their parents more often. They are able to do this because they aren't confined to school for the huge portion of the day. And yes, school does provide socialization, but that is very structured and non-normative socialization. But that can be important too. So how do homeschoolers get this structured socialization? Well, most homeschoolers participate in community activities like Little League, 4-H, music and theater groups, singing and art lessons, or the Scouts, and other things like that. This is a way to make up for the lack of very structured socialization that happens in schools. They get that normative socialization by being out with their parents, and they make up for the structured socialization through community groups. Another way that homeschoolers socialize is through co-ops. A very large majority of homeschooled students and families do attend co-ops, usually held once a week. This is when homeschooling families come together to support each other in the homeschooling education, where parents will teach a group of students from participating families different classes, activities, and skills. This allows students of a homeschooling background to experience what it is like to learn with others and to experience different styles of teaching, because each parent will come with a different teaching style. However, it allows them to experience these things, learning with others and different styles of teaching, without constraining them to the constraints that are often present when you have to attend a public school as your full-time mode of education. So in the end, studies showed that homeschoolers do socialize the same amount as their public school peers. However, they do tend to have a wider age range of individuals they are socializing with because they are socializing in more uncommon ways. But how is homeschooling doing this? How are they providing that equal education to public school without going to public school? I believe that the key is in flexibility and individualized education. Everybody is different, and this is something that we as a society has been moving towards accepting. We've been talking about how everyone's different, how individualization is important, how we need to accept individuality. We have not moved this idea into our educational programs. Because we know everybody is different, we also know that every student learns differently. In homeschooling, a parent is able to analyze their student and figure out what their learning style is. They can then change their teaching style and curriculum and adapt to that learning style and teach their children in those critical years so they get a real solid foundation on the basics of education because they are being taught in their own personal learning style. And this is something public schools simply can't do because of the student-to-teacher ratio. Homeschooling also allows students to work at their own pace and apply time and focus where it is needed. An example of this would be a student who is doing very well in math. They're grasping all of the concepts, they're where they should be, so they only spend 30 minutes on math a day. However, they're really struggling with science. They're not understanding those basic concepts, so they can take the time they would have spent on math and spend it on science. Maybe they spend 2 hours on science a day. They're able to do this because they aren't confined to 40 to 60-minute time blocks for each class. They're able to apply time and focus where it is needed so they can stay at the same level and get those basics down. But why is this important? Why do we even need to know that homeschooling can be just as good as public schooling? Because parents need to know their options. They need to know that homeschooling is a viable option so that if that does happen to be the right option for their student, they know it can work and they can make that choice. It is important to understand the different modes of education so that each parent can make a decision that is right for their student and their family. And maybe that's homeschooling, maybe it isn't, but it's important to know that that is a viable option. To know that homeschooling can provide an education equal in value to that of public schooling, that homeschooled students are just as ready for college as their public school peers, and that they are just as socialized as their public school peers. In the end, homeschoolers were found to be better educated than national averages, to vote at higher rates, to have a positive view on their homeschooling experience, and to be generally well-adjusted, productive members of society. Thank you.